One. Hey, college wrestling fans, this is Johnny Thompson, number one. Today's host is 10-time Coach of the Year, David Ray, who coached Montana State Northern. Thank you for coming to the show today, Coach Ray.
You're welcome, Stephen.
So my first question for you is, Montana State Northern has had a tremendous wrestling team ever since the early 80s is when they really started getting on the map of NAIA wrestling. They won the 1991 and 1992 NAIA team championship, but when you got there, you took Northern Light Wrestling to heights unheard of. In 12 years, 11 of those years were top 8 finishes. 7 of those years were top 4 finishes with 4 national titles, 1 second, 1 third, and 1 fourth. How did you go about putting together such an impressive resume
It
there?
was part of it was determination, a lot of time, but it was just the effort of getting the right recruits. And I'll be honest, my first couple of years there, after my second year, I had to meet with the AD and the athletic trainer, and they wanted to know um, what I was going to do to keep guys from getting injured so often. And the doors to the athletic department were revolving doors. They said I had more guys, but I always had 30 some guys on the team. The thing is, I said it takes time to figure the coaches around here to figure out when they recommend someone, they didn't know the level that I wanted and what they thought was at the level that would compete. Um, we were on two different playing fields. It took a few years and a lot of time on the phone, a lot of recruiting, and we were fortunate. I always say probably the number one recruit I got that changed everything was when I got Turk Lords. And the reason I say that is because he won junior Fargo. He won Greco, was second in freestyle and the finals. When you get a guy at that caliber and you get him to come to your program, where a lot of Division Ones were looking at him, uh, it made other recruits that you tried to bring into the program later realize they weren't too good for Montana State Northern. Because if Turk Lords could go there, and they didn't accomplish anything what he had, how could they say they were too good? So that's what really changed the format. Once I got him, even though I had some other guys that come in that were pretty good during the time, but once I got him in there, it seemed like it made it people noticed that he was going to school there, and it made it easier to get some other individuals. But it took a lot of time, and it just on the phone a lot and calling and everyone under every rock, and it went from coast to coast. It didn't matter if it was from New York all the way to California.
You know, you had so many great teams during your era as a coach. We could probably talk about each one of them, but that team in 2000, 11 All-Americans. Can you
Yeah,
talk a
but it
little
wasn't
bit?
perfect. We wanted 12.
Yeah, you wanted 12. I understand that, but I'm a wrestling historian, and NAIA wrestling does allow 12 wrestlers to go to the national tournament, but it's unheard of to get 11 All-Americans. I mean, that's only happened a handful of times throughout the entire history of NAIA wrestling. What made that team so special?
It was our third time going for the national championship, and we won it that year. But the what really it wasn't the team was that special or anything. What it was is they were around other people that were winners, other individuals that believed in winning. And when you're around those type of individuals, you have guys that perform higher levels that they normally wouldn't have if they were at another program. But when expectations are high and everybody expects to win, and even your teammates expect you to win, and you don't even know if you're capable of winning, but they believe in you, you it's no different than Grandview doing now. They have individuals that are placing that and that normally probably wouldn't at another program, but because of the tradition he's built there, the guys win. And that's like anywhere. Gable, when Gable was at Iowa back in the late 70s, early 80s, there was guys that were placing because they were part of Iowa. If they had another singlet on, they wouldn't have been an All-American. So that by that time, that's what there's a few guys that were placed that were freshmen that placed that year. I had one guy that wasn't even seated and knocked off the number two, who got up, the number two C got upset. He got in the blood round. He had to beat him to be an All American, and he was a true freshman, and he did it. Tammy LaBeouf from Browning, and just a Native American kid from Browning, Montana. And so there was one. And then you had Chris Hayes, that was an All American at 165, who was a redshirt freshman, and he was fifth, but all four guys above him were seniors. So it was, and guess what? After that year, he decided he was going to put all of his time more in academics, which he was and so he never wrestled anymore. He probably could have, he had 3 more years left, probably would have won it a few times.
Yeah. You spoke earlier about Turk Lords, but man, you had so many. I mean, not just Montana State Northern, but NAIA wrestling in itself. You had so many legendary names on some of your teams. You know, also with Turk Lords, you had Tyson Thieberge, you had Emmett Wilson, you had Strider Davis. You had some of these. These are guys. Even all these years later, people still talk about all the time. Um, Talk about some of those guys and what they mean to the Northern Lights program.
You know, like I said, I start off with Turk, but when you get it, there's a lot of stories in there that you don't know. Just like Emmett Wilson, he wasn't very successful his freshman year coming in. In fact, he was getting beat on pretty much, and he didn't think he was very good. He was going to quit his first year. He was done after that, his redshirt year. And Mark and Mike Lane, two of my wrestlers from Montana, Wyoming, from Buffalo, Wyoming, and Sheridan stuff. Got recruited them from PAL, Northwest Junior College. They talked to me and said, "Hey, this is part of it. You stick it out, you'll make it. You'll be fine." And he uh, he stuck it out, and ended up being third and three first. But it was getting all those guys. It wasn't those individuals being they were tough. Turk Lords, Emmett, and Tyson and Strider. But what made them good was the workout partners they had in there. You know, Emmett was coming in as a freshman, was getting beat by Kyle Fisher, who was a fourth and three-time finalist, was a champion only one time, but he was fourth as a freshman and three-time finalist. But the all those guys and with Lanes, with Tyson, and with Turk, and all those other guys that are on the team, they made everybody sharper. And it's true when they say steel sharpen steel. That's been said for thousands of years, and it's still true today because it wasn't. It was. I was fortunate enough to get those kind of individual. I knew what I was looking for, and I was fortunate to get them to come to Northern, and they all made each other better.
I've been a college wrestling fan for, let's see here, I'm 40 now, so about 32, 33 years I've been watching college wrestling. And one of the things that, when I started writing about college wrestling about 20 years ago or so, there was a lot of times when I noticed that, and I think you probably noticed this as well, NAIA wrestling doesn't always get a lot of respect, right? You kind of get some of these D1 and D2 guys that kind of snub their noses at the NAIA. And one of the ways in which you guys were able to not only, you didn't ask for respect, you demanded it. And you demanded it at the Midlands Wrestling Tournament. You had guys go in there and, Turk Lords, sixth and fourth place. Tyson Thieberge made the finals. And then Emmett Wilson placed twice. Then the senior year, he won the Midlands Wrestling Tournament. What did that mean to you as a coach to be able to go in there and show these Division I guys, we can compete with you and we can beat you?
Well, that's one of the things that when I recruited, goes back to recruiting and building the teams. I wanted to go to the two toughest tournaments of the year in Division One, and that was the Las Vegas Cliff King tournament, where you'd have 48, 50 teams, and the other one was Midlands. Those were the two toughest tournaments in the season, with all the Division Ones that you could possibly imagine to meet. And I use those tournaments part of my schedule to recruit. And I would tell guys that were at higher levels. I say, you come here, you do well. If you want to leave and transfer, I will let you, and I will help you. They all end up loving it because the atmosphere we had there with the brandings, the springs, and the falls, or everything we did, and they never none of them would leave. But it was going to those tournaments were part of recruiting, and I expected that. The thing is, it's not like there's any magic. My expectations were they could place it. I believe they could. They believe, and they knew I believe they could. So what they do, they reach those expectations. It's all around. It's all about the environment around them. You believe in all of them, and you have most of the time. I would say I had higher expectations, probably all the time, of what they were capable of doing than what they did of themselves. And because you realize um, people are people, wrestlers are wrestlers. We all do the same thing, put our shoes on the same way, singlets, whatever. And it's all about, and if you're prepared, and I feel that we were prepared from the practice room to compete with anyone. So then it was just all mental. And so you try to just get them, say, hey, believe in yourself. I believe in you, and just go out there and let it loose. And yeah, you knew that they were competing to the best, but I had some of those individuals that had the athletic ability and were prepared, and physically, and then it came down to be mentally. And some of those guys like Turk Tyson. I mean, Tyson. I don't know if you look at his Midlands. He beat Justice Smith from Iowa in the quarters, and then or him in this, and then he beat Damian Hahn in the semis. Then in the finals, he wrestled the guy from Indiana. I can't think of his name, but he beat.
Victor Saveda.
Yep. And I think he was so excited about being in the finals, he had a mental letdown. I mean, he beat those other two guys placed higher. Justice Smith, and they placed higher than he did when it came down to the national tournament. But I think they all finished like third, fourth, and sixth. Those three.
Uh, Put me on the spot right here. Justin Smith got third that season, and then Damian Hahn got fifth, and then Victor Saveda finished one match for being an All American.
Oh, I thought he was sixth, but yep. But
I
yeah,
guess
so he beat those, and after Tyson beat those two guys, and it must have been it must have been Hahn, and then but after in the semis, but Gable came down to me and goes, "You have a good one there,"
yeah,
and he never
yeah,
says that about anybody unless he's
yeah,
I mean, but he never says that. And
yeah.
I had other ones. He didn't say that about Emmett or anybody else. But so yeah, he just liked Tyson was fun to watch wrestle. And Tyson never redshirted. I tried to get him to redshirt, and he wanted to wrestle. He should have. He needed that year of maturity, of mental maturity. He'd have won it. He'd have won any ice 2 or 3 times if he would have taken that one redshirt year. It would have made a difference. And we all know that. But you know what? Life goes on, and you don't look back.
Yeah, in wrestling, our Heisman Trophy is called the Danny Hodge Award, and it's been around for 30 plus years, and we've had two wrestlers that were non-D1 wrestlers win it. And only one wrestler ever for the NAIA. What did it mean to you as a coach and for the Montana State Northern program when Emmett Wilson walked away with that honor?
You know, what it did for me was showing that us wrestling in the Midlands and Vegas, Las Vegas, Clipkeen turn invitational, and competing those level, go wrestling against Boise at their place or ours. Greg Randall would sit there. We'd go home and switch every other year wrestling, trying to get a schedule, and that was very competitive. It showed that it paid off. If we didn't wrestle in those two tournaments, he wouldn't have got selected. But so that's one thing it did, just showing that if we wrestle, put scheduling having a schedule like that paid off. And I did it for my athletes. They didn't have to wrestle in these tournaments, but it was an opportunity. That's what it was. Now, what did it mean for our program? It meant a lot for NEI more than anything. I just wanted to show that you didn't have to be in Division 1 to reach the pinnacle and of Division 1 wrestling, or wrestling, collegiate wrestling, we should say. And also it for the all other schools and other individuals, wrestlers, it showed them that they didn't have to go to Division 1. They could go to another school and get notice. The other thing for our school, it just showed little northern Montana. If you knew where Montana State Northern was in Havre, 30 miles from the Canadian borderline, and there's only 1 million people in the whole state, but our closest town, or we had 10,000 people, which I call a town. So that's a city in Montana. But the closest one, 58,000, was Great Falls, 100, 15 miles away. So if recruiting up there was a lot of work, takes a lot of time, and but it meant a lot for that little school out in the middle of nowhere, that you anybody anywhere can achieve something. And it should just get motivating any other school, which I'm sure it did.
Coach, my last question for you today. On the show is kind of a two-part question. Just kind of want to get your feelings on NI wrestling as a whole. So, when you were around and you were coaching, you guys had a great rivalry with another great program, Montana Western. And you guys also competed against Valley City State. And those are two programs we no longer have. So, wrestling is if you're a fan of wrestling like I am and you are, it's a roller coaster ride, right? We drop a
Yep.
team, we get a team, we drop a team, we get a team. We lost Montana Western. Want to ask you your feelings about that. But in the meantime, since you've been gone, we have gained a great rivalry with In-State Providence. That's been a team that has come along, and they built a great program. They have All Americans almost every season. So talk about your feelings about how we lost Montana Western, and yet we also gained Providence in the ups and downs of losing and gaining wrestling programs.
Yeah, Northwestern was a great rivalry. It was fun. TJ Nelson was the coach there then, and it was it's all the programs up there north where we are at, even the junior college like Western Wyoming and Northwest with Jim Ziegler, Bob Christensen, that was at Rick's. We all would go home and home because we knew we couldn't find teams to compete. Because, as you know, you've done the research long forgotten there, and so we all went home and home to help each other have home meets. So I knew I could have 3 junior colleges and Western, those 4 teams. I'd have 4 home meets every year, and they could guarantee those guys would help each other. So they all have 4 home meets every year. And that's the minimum. Then you try to get somebody else in. So you 1 or 2 that were exceptional, maybe every other year. So you maybe have 6 or 7. That was pretty good up there, to have 6 home meets, and for anybody. But going back to your questions, losing them, you know, it was fun. It was a competitive, it was a rival. It also motivates you to work harder because you wanted to beat them, someone you wanted to defeat. So it raised the bar. When they drop, it it lowered the bar to a degree that you had the competition within state. But as you know, with a state like Montana, it's not that popular. You couldn't find all the wrestlers you wanted within the state to win a national title. You had to still leave the state. And you But my goal was always to have as many Montana State kids from Montana wrestle on the team. It would be nice to have, all 10, but that was impossible to win it, to be at that level. But, then in 2004, 5 season, that's when Providence was started. And um, Clay, oh God, I'm going blank right now. But that was their first year. They did well, very well. Van Clay was the coach, and he's at Central now, Division 3. But he did a great job. and it's been a very successful program. It's kind of like you got to go through there to get to Northern. It's kind of not a good deal, but it and there's been a lot of other programs that have started since then. I mean, now there's probably, I think, 50 or 62 or some programs, and the sport has grown. There's programs that never had wrestling ever before that now sponsor wrestling. There's programs that had wrestling back in the 70s and dropped in the 70s and 80s that now have reinstated wrestling. There's so many programs out there. If you look back, I mean, you didn't even know they had wrestling. There was programs in Florida in the 70s that had wrestling. I had no idea. You know, you look at
Yeah,
all these programs, Clemson, Syracuse, all over, that been without wrestling for so long, people didn't even know they had wrestling.
you're 100% right about that, Coach. Unfortunately, we are running out of time here, so I do want to thank you for being a part of Johnny Thompson number one today. You've been a great guest, and we hope to have you on again sometime.
I appreciate it very much. And thank you for everything you do to support the sport. Bye, Stephen.
Bye.